Okay, so we're recording. So before we get started, or let's say we are getting started, questions. We've spent a lot of time now with the dead. So I'm going to go with the idea that you've all finished it. It's important that you have. What are you thinking? What's on your minds regarding this story? Anyone?
Yeah,
Yes.
I want to ask. I just finished reading it, and I want to ask that why is it that Gabriel and the wife, when they went to the hotel or something,
Right.
and there the lady started remembering her former boyfriend who was dead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know why is it that place that she begins to remember the boy.
Okay.
Went there for another purpose, but why this?
Okay. No, it's a great question. So what you're suggesting, you don't know why when they get back to the hotel room, she seems to suddenly start thinking about this
Yes,
boyfriend from many years earlier.
yes.
Well, okay. So let's go with that because she actually starts thinking about him before that.
Okay.
All right. So that's actually a great question because it's a great way to go right back into the story. So let me bring it up. Share screen. Okay, so let's refresh ourselves specifically now, and we are going to focus in on the third part of the story now and the ending, which really does involve Gabriel and his wife. So a couple of things that we can look at to start seeing about their interactions and when things seem to shift a little bit. Remember, we've talked a lot about how Gabriel interacts with women and how very much he is impacted by the way women respond to him. He is very narcissistic, very self-absorbed, and is very much, as a result of being narcissistic, self-absorbed, egotistic, is very much wanting people to respond in the way that he expects them to, a kind of control, especially when it comes to the women in the story. He feels he has his place. There's always this element which comes with the egocentric attitude that he has of feeling superior, feeling in control, and only seeing things as they reflect on him. Right? And it's an important point because it has a very, it resonates very much with his epiphany at the end, because he comes to realize this quality in himself.
Excuse me, sir. Can I know the page number? Sorry.
Oh, good point. So we are in the section 2. That's one of the problems with doing it this way. Hold on. Let me see. Put this. That's what we can see. It's frustrating that I can't get the. Okay, so this is after the encounter with Miss Ivers. So, hold on. Section 2. We are looking at a page. Almost there. Hold on. Gabriel Hardley. Hold on. We are looking at page 206, 207.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, so remember we talked, and we don't really have to go over it in much more detail because we talked about it extensively. The exchange that Gabriel has with Molly Ivers. Remember where she calls him out and he finally, she gets under his skin regarding this theme of nationalism, where she discovers that he's writing for a journal that is pro-British. She calls him out on it. He gets very agitated and blurts out towards the end of that encounter that he doesn't like Ireland, right? And then she asks him, seemingly to ease the tension, though we can't really understand exactly what Molly's motives are, but it sets up where she asks him to come and spend the summer in the west of Ireland, in the country, right outside of Dublin. Dublin's a city, and to get, and the implication is to come out to the west of Western Ireland to learn more about Ireland, right? She's very much a nationalist. She's very much about Ireland, the Irish language, Irish independence, for Ireland to become independent of England. Remember, we talked about this independence movement to get out from under the imperialistic control that England had over Ireland. Okay, that's again one of the themes that runs through the story. And she gets under his skin. She accuses him of being a West Briton, which is someone who is doesn't really have an identity. Still adheres to England and Ireland, doesn't really take a position, and leans more towards an Irishman who leans more towards England than Ireland. And we see this with Gabriel, his desire to always be on the continent, to be outside of Ireland. He wants to go on vacation. He wants to go to France. All right, and that's again demonstrated in the discussion we had about the galoshes. The galoshes serving two purposes. One is as a protection from the snow. We're going to talk a lot about the snow today, but also the galoshes as being something that's alien to Ireland. It is something that comes from in Gabriel's mind, the more sophisticated European way of living, right? And when Miss Ivors asks Gabriel to come and spend more time in Ireland, in the country, she also says, of course, bring your wife, right? Bring Greta. Anyways, I want to look at this one little exchange to demonstrate where the relationship between Gabriel and his wife starts to reveal itself. All right, where there is a bit of a disconnect, right, which really comes into full bloom, if you will, when we get to the end, when he realizes he doesn't really know her nearly as well as he thought he did, and that she has a life very much independent of his life. That's something he's not able to see. Everything for him revolves around him. And when we see the beginnings of this, is you recall, you can bring, when Miss Ivors says you can bring your wife out, isn't she from there? Isn't she from the country? Right? And Gabriel has a very low opinion of Ireland as a country as a whole, and in particular those who live outside of the cities, outside of the cultural centers. And he was somewhat dismissive when Miss Ivors says, isn't your wife from that area, the country? And his response to that was, well, her people are, right? So he's not even wanting to acknowledge that his wife is from the country, because they're not sophisticated and so on, as he thinks he is. And shortly after that, she asks him, ask Gabriel's wife, right? What row had you with Miss Ivors? Right. So everyone saw that they had this conflict and so on. And this leads to this exchange here. There was no row, said Gabriel moodily. Right. Pull this up. Hold on. Because again, you always want to be attentive to these things, right? How did he say it? There was no row. We know it says moodily. He's in a mood. Only she wanted me to go for a trip to the west Okay, west is important here because in the west is the Irish countryside. To the east is Europe, is France and Germany. Right? And that again plays in towards the end. Little things that you want to be attentive to. West versus east. The west of Ireland, I said I wouldn't. His wife, right, Greta, clasped her hands excitedly and gave a little jump. "Oh, do go, Gabriel," she cried. "I'd love to see Galway again." Right? So what is this telling us? Gabriel has a very negative attitude towards the west of Ireland, Galway, dismisses it, doesn't even want to acknowledge fully that his wife is from there. But his wife, "I'd love to see Galway again." Okay, so you see the disconnect. And note how Gabriel responds to his wife's excitement at the prospect of going to Galway, where they were invited by Molly Ivors. And Gabriel says, "You can go if you like," coldly. Right? He's angry. "Oh, you can go if you like." She looked at him for a moment, then turned to Miss Malins and said, "There's a nice husband for you, Miss Malins." Now, I'm highlighting this, and this is in response to the question that was just asked. Bear with me, be patient. I'm getting there. Because this shows a rift between the two. You can go if you like. All right, it's very dismissive, and it certainly demonstrates that there are, that they think differently about this in any case. And it's representative of a kind of, if you will, divorce between the two, a separation between the two. And this dismissive response by his wife, "There's a nice husband for you, Ms. Malins." Of course, she's being sarcastic. What she's saying there, that's not very nice at all. And it's a demonstration, it's a hint for us now that we finished the story. So when we come back to it, we can see it's foreshadowing. It's hinting that they don't really know each other that well. That, and for Gabriel, that's very troubling. He gets very defensive. He gets cold, right? And he doesn't want to deal with the idea that his wife in any way is separate from him and his ideas and what he thinks is important. Okay? So this is the beginning of showing their differences. Now, specifically, when we move down, bear with me in terms of page numbers, I'll try to find it, okay? But when you remember when they're getting ready to leave, and we'll come back to it. Let's stick with what we're, and hold on. So we're into the third section now. Remember the separation of the sections. So the third section, we're moving on to, we're page 223 here. Okay. So yeah, 223 to 224. And what happens here, remember the party is breaking up, right? The piercing morning air came into the hall and they were standing. So they closed the door. They're getting ready to leave. Always remember as well, we've talked about this. We know we always come back to the title, the dead. So when you're seeing anything, right, referring to death, right, what I was looking at earlier when they were discussing the monks, right, it comes up at the dinner table. They're talking about the monks and they're talking about this particular sect of monks who sleep in their coffins to remind them of their ultimate fate, I suppose. So they're getting ready to leave here. Let me get to this bit. where you're first going to see when she starts reflecting about her past love. So they're looking for cabs and all that. We saw that here. So down here, so this would be on page, okay, hold on. Okay, so page 226, right? The last paragraph on 226. So it's down here. He stood still in the gloom of the hall, trying to catch the air that the voice was singing and gazing up at his wife. So go up a little bit further than that, right? He got to the door of the others. He was in a dark part of the hall. Okay, let's look at this in detail because it really speaks to it. Gabriel had not gone to the door of the others. He was in a dark part of the hall, gazing up the staircase. A woman was standing near the top of the first flight in the shadow. He could not see her face, but he could see the terracotta and salmon pink panels of her skirt, excuse me, which the shadow made appear black and white. It was his wife. Again, emphasizing that he doesn't recognize her at the beginning. A woman. It takes some time to realize that's his wife. And she's standing near the top of the first flight of stairs. She was leaning on the banisters listening to something. And Gabriel was surprised at her stillness and strained his ear to listen also, but he could hear little save the noise of the laughter and dispute in the front side. So the image is he's downstairs, everyone's getting ready to leave, they're getting the cabs to take them back to wherever they're going, home or to the hotel, and he looks up the stairs and he sees a woman who is very still and listening to something. Can't hear exactly what she's listening to, which has him removed from her, but she's very attentive. The noise, laughter, the speed of the piano, and a few notes of a man's singing voice. She's listening to a song. Someone is singing, right? Remember, we've talked about the importance of music being everywhere. He stood in the gloom, note the word, the gloom of the hall, trying to catch the air that the voice was singing and gazing up at his wife. There was a grace and mystery, note the mystery, in her attitude as if she were a symbol of something. Okay, so his image, what he's seeing with his wife at the top of the stairs listening to this music is mysterious to him. He's not recognizing it. It's his wife. But there's something different here. She's symbolizing something that's very vague. What? He doesn't know. He asked himself, what is a woman standing on the stairs? Shadow, note shadow here. Listening to distant music, not just music, but distant to him. Distant to him because he can't hear it because he's at the bottom of the stairs. But distant to him as well because the effect that the music is having on his wife, he'll never get because it's something that is very particular and impacting his wife in a very symbolic way. Okay, if he were a painter, he would paint her in that attitude. He's intrigued by the way she looks. He doesn't recognize it. It's as if his wife is a new entity. Distant music, he would call the picture if he was a painter. Again, distant. The key term here is not only is the music distant, but he said distant music he would call the picture if he were a painter, if he were to paint a picture of his wife in this moment, a picture that does not have music, he would call the picture distant music, which is symbolizing the distance that his wife is from him in this moment. Again, remember, he did not even recognize her. All he saw was a woman. The hall door was closed, and so on. We move on from there. Now, the importance of this, as is unpacked here, but doesn't really come for us to have a full understanding until much later, is what is this music that she's listening to that's impacting her, that's making her seemingly alien to her own husband, that he can't recognize her. Well, as we're going to find out, the music, the song that she's listening to, is a song that the boy she was in love with, or at least was certainly in love with her, used to sing this song. This is the moment when she starts thinking of him. Okay? So it's not just in the hotel room. That's where she lets it out. That's when, because of course, Gabriel doesn't know anything about this guy. But this is the moment where she starts thinking about him. The power of music to invoke memories. Remember, we talked a lot about the past, right? The people, the past, which in the past are the people who have died. Movements have died, right? The past is the past. It's not the present. What happened in the past, if it's people who have died, but it's also the things in the past are no longer alive, because the present is different. Right, that's where we're talking, but we note, and he mentions this back in his speech at the dinner table, nostalgia for the past infuses the present. The dead of the past is still present in the present, if you will. Okay, but it's different, right? Much of it is predicated on memory. Memory is never absolute, right? Memories and which infuses with nostalgia, transforms the actuality often of what transpired in the past and makes it into something ephemeral, something that's not tangible, something that's not concrete, and that seeps into the present and impacts individuals in the present that were impacted by things that happened in the past. Our memories of the past are always subject to, alterations, right? If you guys, think about something that happened 2-3 years ago, something that was impactful in your life, the memory of what happened in the past is very real. But in terms of the actual specific details of what transpired at that very moment 2-3 years ago is altered. Right? That's what happens with the passage of time. Right? If any, for those of us, and particularly related to this story, is, people who were part of our life in the past who are no longer with us are still with us, but it's not the same thing. But they're with us and they have altered us to some degree. And it's something that's very particular to the individual. It's something that's very hard to share with others, the full impact of it. We can talk about someone we knew in the past who is no longer with us, someone we may have all known, but how it infuses within us as individuals is different. And it makes it's very distinct and unique to each and every individual. This is something Gabriel doesn't understand, that other people, including his wife, who conceivably he would be closest with, has things in her life that are unique to her, right? So there's two things going on. One is, which we can compare between how Greta has this very specific incident in her past, which is part of who she is. That's something that obviously Gabriel can't share because he didn't know him. But if we go back to Gabriel's speech at the dinner table, he's talking about the same type of thing, but in a much more universal way. That we all have shared memories of the past, shared memories of individuals who are no longer with us. And we bring those into the present often through nostalgia. Now we're going from a macro cosmic view of the past and the dead of the past and how they impact us to a microcosmic view in something that is unknown to anyone but that individual. In this case, Greta's memory invoked by this music of the boy who was in love with her many years ago. Of course, Gabriel has no idea at this point. She hasn't shared this, and there's no way he could know. But what is relevant here, extraordinarily relevant, is how he reacts to seeing his wife in a very different way. She has been transformed in some manner by this song. Okay? So again, specifically to your question, this is where she first starts remembering. Right? And certainly we can presume that she had remembered other times, but this is having a major impact on her, an impact to such an extent that she will now tell Gabriel about it when they get back to the hotel room. And it's not as if she never thought of it before, one presumes that she had, but she never felt it necessary to bring it up. But now, because of the music and the impact having such a profound effect on her, it's changed her. Note how Gabriel responds to her change, though. Right? It's very telling. Let's take a look. Jump down a bit. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, I'm going to paraphrase a bit, and then we can look at more, because this is pretty much where we ended last class. So they're leaving, right? Remember, we had this good night, good night, good night, good night, good night, stay safe, all these, again, exemplifying the routine. Remember, we talked last week about the horse that goes round and round, right? And how that is just a mundane routine existence, which exemplifies the mundane routine existence of the people who are at this Christmas party, right? And you see it here. This is another example. Good night, good night, good night, good night, right? This is one of the things that is being critiqued in the story, is the lack of passion, if you will. The routine existence, something that troubles Gabriel. It's one of the reasons Gabriel is very down on Ireland and Dublin, is he doesn't see anything there that is exciting. And he's always looking to go to France and Germany and the galoshes, everything that's outside of this very routine existence that he sees Ireland being. But of course, that's contrasted with Molly Ivors, who sees, it all depends on how you perceive it and how much you're willing to invest in it. Remember the exchange they have about language. He likes to go to Europe for the languages and so on. And she goes, well, what about your own language? All right. So it's perspective for her. She can find that excitement, that purpose in life in Ireland. Gabriel can't. And certainly many of the people that we're seeing here don't seem to have the same kind of passion that Miss Ivors has for Ireland. They just seem to be doing their daily routine and really nothing more than that. Gabriel, we know, is looking for something more. That's why he's down on them. He criticizes them, thinks he's better than they are to a large extent. So after this, again, reminder of the routine of the rest of the people at the party. Again, not to say that they're bad people. It's not being suggested at all, but there's just not much there. Complacency and routine. When they're leaving, right, she, right here, which is the she being his wife, let's go to this, was walking on before him with Mr. Bartle Darcy. That's who was singing. Okay. Her shoes in a brown parcel, note, color brown, tucked under one arm and her hands holding the skirt up from the slush. The slush, again, another form of the snow, right? She had no longer any grace of attitude, but Gabriel's eyes were still bright with happiness, right? We're getting this, we're now discovering about how Gabriel is responding specifically to seeing his wife as a stranger, right? That
Just
also.
Hello.
Yes.
His happiness is because after he saw her wife singing, right? I mean, of the impression that he has.
His wife isn't singing. His wife is listening to someone else sing. She's hearing a song.
No. Okay, maybe but Gabriel's eyes were still bright with happiness. So what I understand from this is that he is still impressed by his wife, when he listened to her singing
so his wife doesn't sing. She's on the stairs listening to someone else singing. She's hearing a song that is being sung by Bartell D'Arcy. Okay, it's important.
Okay. Yeah.
But yes, you're right, because what he is happy about, it's not that she was singing. Remember, when he first sees her at the top of the stairs listening to the song, right? When he first hears her at the top of the stairs listening to the song, he doesn't recognize her. She's a stranger to him.
Mm-hmm.
His happiness is coming out of that he's seeing his wife differently. It speaks to the routine, the mundane routine that is what he complains about in his life. His happiness, which continues for a number of paragraphs here, his excitement is because this is something,
exactly.
It's something new. Okay? It's like, whoa, who is this woman? Right? So it speaks to that breaking free of the routine that is not just Ireland and Dublin, but clearly for Gabriel is the routine of his marriage. It's not to say he doesn't care about his wife, but there isn't that novelty. There isn't that newness, which is typical of most relationships after a period of time. Okay? But he's certainly going not overboard, but it's certainly impacting him in a tremendous way. Right? And this is, and we're seeing it here. So his eyes were still bright with happiness. The blood went bounding along his veins, and thoughts went rioting. Note the words that are being used. Rioting through his brain.
Mm-hmm.
Proud, joyful, tender, valorous. I mean, this is, I mean, it's as if he is floating on a cloud here. He's so excited. And again, he doesn't know why his wife looked differently to him. We don't know at this stage. We know because we finished the story. She looked differently. She was perhaps acting differently because she was thinking about a past love. Of course, Gabriel has no idea of this. And he's not even trying to understand why she's different. Again, comes back to his selfishness. He's not like going, you would think he'd go up to his wife, are you okay? What happened there? What you look so different. You look so involved in that song. Is everything okay? No, he's just running with it because it's exciting him. It's different. And he's, rioting through his brain. She seemed to him so frail that he longed to defend her against something and then be alone with her. This again speaks to the way he treats most people, particularly women. He's going to defend her. He's going to be in control. This is how he wants the people around him to defer to him. right? He's going to defend her against something, doesn't matter what, anything. And then to be alone with her, where he can play his part as her defender, all right? He could, again, if there's any doubt about how happy he is, how excited he is, look at, again, all rioting through his brain. He could not eat for happiness. Right? It's very important because when we get to the hotel room, when he crashes down, when he realizes that she is not feeling the same way, right? Because his expectations are, well, she must feel the same way as well. If I feel this way, then she must feel this way. He's not thinking about what's going on in her mind, almost as if he doesn't care. He only cares how it impacts him. And it speaks to his longing and need for something to break the monotony of his existence, of his life. Right? It's not that people are bad or mean. It's just there's nothing there to excite him. Suddenly he's very excited by his wife, who, remember, he was dismissing earlier when she said she wanted to go to the country. Well, then you go then. I don't care. I'm not going, and I don't care. You can go if you want. But that was the wife that he was accustomed to. Now she seems to be something very different. A wave of yet more tender joy escaped from his heart. We're going to get into something here with the memory, right? So you're going to see a lot of mentions. We've been talking about memory, right? And we've been seeing how, again, go back to his speech at the dinner table when he talks about the past, talks about tradition, the importance of tradition, which a tradition is something that comes from the past. Traditional way of doing things is because it's the way it's always been done. How the past infuses the present. But we tend to cherry pick the past. And the past is usually, and it's certainly if we're engaged in it through a nostalgic view, is drawing on those things that were good in the past. We longed for those things, for those days and so on. Why can't things be that way? Well, they are a little bit, but we should always respect them through tradition. Okay, so there's this constant interplay with the past and the present, which also has a direct relation, of course, to the, again, dualities that run throughout with the living and the dead. Because ultimately that's what the story's about, right? It's called The Dead. And I think we touched on this, but if we haven't, just as a reminder or as to bring it up, to emphasize it, when we talk about the dead, we have literal death. They're talking about people who have died in the past. But what is undercutting that, or not undercutting it so much as meshing with that, is the idea of a kind of living death. Living when there's nothing to really live for. Living in a routine, uninspiring, non-purposeful life. Right? And that's being commented on here from a number of angles, not the least of which is showing the other people with their routines and mundane conversation and so on. But it's also about Gabriel, and certainly how he feels that, what is he doing? Where is he going to try and find something that is alive in his life, right? And this whole business with him getting so excited at his wife and this newness, if you will, of his wife, emphasizes the fact of his lack, the lack of having something that exciting in his life. And without that excitement, without that passion, without that purpose, then life is somewhat like a living dead. If you have nothing more than that, then your life becomes it's not literal death, obviously, but compare it with all this excitement. That's living. Just going good night, good night, good night, good night, being that horse that just goes round and round and round. The argument being made here is that really life? You're alive, technically, but it's a kind of death. All right. The excitement here for Gabriel is he's breaking out of this routine. Well, the others haven't, but he seems to be. But is it misplaced? Because it's dependent on his wife and her newness. Okay. Before I move on, because we're going to be getting towards the final bit where all this is going to come to a head. Questions?
No, it's good.
Good. Okay. So let's, because I really do want to wrap this up today, so we can move on to Araby for next week. Let's take a look, and let's see where we're going to start looking. Let's look when they get to the hotel. Okay, so again, Gabriel's expectations when he gets back to the hotel are obvious, right? He's in a great mood. He's with his wife. The kids are back at home, being looked after by someone else, and he's looking to have just a wonderful end of the evening with his wife. Be attentive here. Again, I talk about dualities. One of the dualities that we're always looking at in all the stories and everything that we read is light and darkness, right? Light symbolically represents awareness, vision. We can see in the light. Darkness, obviously, the opposite. So when they get back to the hotel and they go up to their room, note here the imagery. All right, the porter pointed at the top of the electric light. What's an electric light? Right, it's a fabricated light. Okay, it's not like sunlight, and it's a point of recognizing the different kind of light there can be. But Gabriel says, we don't want any light. Very important. We have light enough from the street, which is not much light. Okay? He doesn't want any light. Why? He's choosing to be in darkness. Right? At this point, it's he's happy. He's looking forward to, what lies ahead in the evening. Light could reveal things. He doesn't want anything revealed at this point. He's really happy with the way things are. All right, so even note as well, even the candle. We have enough light from the street. He added, pointing to the candle, you might remove that handsome article like a good man's will. Even take away the candle. Okay. By such an eye, the Imam good night went out. Gabriel shot the lock too, and now what we have the light described as a ghostly light, right? Remember the title, it's called The Dead. A ghostly light from the street lamp. That's the only light they have inside now. So it's a very eerie light. It's a dim light. It's a ghostly light. And the ghostly light is symbolic of what's about to transpire here. It's similar to like a fog. Okay? It's hard to really discern what you can see in this kind of ghostly light. And of course, it references back to the idea of the dead, ghosts, and so on. He looked down to the street in order that his emotions might calm a little. She had taken off her hat, okay, and Gabriel paused a moment, watching, and then said, Greta, Right? He calls out to her. She turned away from the mirror, slowly walked over the shaft of lights towards him, shaft of light. Her face looked so serious and weary that the words would not pass. No, it was not the moment yet. He's saying to himself, oh, okay, well, why is he calling her here? Well, it's time to enjoy the evening. When she comes to him, her face looks so serious and weary, he realized, oh, this isn't really the time yet, right? So that's not going according to plan. You look tired, he said. I am a little. You don't feel ill or weak? No, tired, that's all. She went out to the window, stood there looking out. Gabriel waited, and then, fearing that diffidence was about to conquer him, he said abruptly, by the way, Greta, what is it? You know that poor fellow Malins? He said quickly. Yes, what about him? Okay, I gotta clear this. Now, what's important about this, well, poor fellow, he's a decent sort of chap and all, continued Gabriel, and this is really important here. Watch what Gabriel's doing. Gabriel said, continued Gabriel, in a false voice. Okay, he's talking about the guy at the party who he had lent money to, but now returned it. Why is he talking about this? Why is this false voice? He doesn't mean this. This isn't what's on his mind. What's he doing here? Okay, he's deflecting to some degree because she didn't look and respond the way that he expected her to. She was annoyed too about something. If she would only turn to him, right? This is what he wants. If she would only turn to him and come to him of her own accord. To take her as she was would be brutal, right? This isn't going according to his plan. And he's getting annoyed. No, he must see some ardor in her face first, in her eyes first. He longed to be master of her strange mood. He's trying to control the situation, move her away from such a serious and weary look to the kind of feeling that he has. He's like, I'm feeling great right now. She needs to feel great too. Gabriel strove to restrain himself from breaking out into brutal language. He longed to cry to her from his soul, to crush her body against his, to overmaster her. This is the Gabriel we know. So again, he's all excited. Everything's going the way he wants it. He hasn't made any inquiries about what his wife is feeling. His wife is looking serious and weary. His concern is not what's wrong. Is everything okay? No. He wants to overmaster her. He's getting angry that she's not responding in the way that he expects her to respond. And of course, that's because he's not taking any time whatsoever to think about what she might be feeling. He's only thinking about himself. Now, bear with me. This is the crux of the story, right? She stood before him an instant, looking at him strangely. Again, the strangeness, right? They're like strangers now. Then suddenly raising herself on tiptoe, resting her hand slightly on his shoulder, she kissed him. And note what she says, you are a very generous person, Gabriel. Okay, of course, there's irony there. How generous is he actually? And what do we mean by, what is being suggested by generous? It's certainly not the type of thing you would necessarily say in a moment of passion. Okay? Yeah. Gabriel, now misunderstanding her, trembling with delight at her sudden kiss, put his hands on her hair and began smoothing back, scarcely touching it with his fingers. The washing had made it fine and brilliant. His heart was brimming over with happiness. He's back again. Oh, she kissed me. Okay, that's all that matters. I don't care why she's in this mood. She's back. Oh, what does she mean by generous person? Well, it doesn't matter. She kissed me. Yay! Things are going my way again. And he's back to his happiness. Just when he was wishing for it, she had come to him of her own accord, which of course is not the case at all. But that's the only way he can see it at this point, because he is still at this point blinded by his own selfishness.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now, again, it's important. The emphasis on this is to contrast with his epiphany. Because remember, at the end, he wakes up. At the end, he's going to recognize this quality in himself. Okay. It's going to be hard recognition for him, but that's what the story ultimately builds to, is this epiphany, this recognition. Now that she had fallen to him so easily, he wondered why he had been so diffident. He stood holding her head between his hands and slipping one arm through her body and drawing her towards him. He said softly, "Greta, dear, what are you thinking about?" Again, does he really care? She did not answer nor yield wholly to his arm. He said again, softly, "Tell me, what is it, Greta? I think I know what is the matter. Do I know? Does he know?" I think I know what is the matter. What does he think is the matter? He has no idea what the matter is. He's just excited now and happy again because he thinks that, okay, she's ready to continue the evening. She did not answer what. Then she said in an outburst of tears, "I'm thinking about that song." That's the song she was listening to on the staircase. Okay, that's why I went back to the staircase to say, when did she first start thinking about her past love? It was when she heard the song on the staircase. She broke loose from him and ran to the bed, throwing her arms across the bed rail, hid her face. Gabriel stood stock still for a moment in astonishment and then followed her. As he passed in the way of the shovel glass, he caught sight of himself. Remember, appearances in the full-length mirror. His broad, well-filled shirt front, his face, whose expression always puzzled him when he saw it in a mirror, and his glimmering gilt eyeglasses. His own face puzzles him. It speaks to this egocentric aspect of his character. It's always about me, me, me. But he doesn't even know who me is. Because when he sees his own face in the mirror, he's puzzled by it. I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, where the overly defensive behavior he has, especially towards women, is a sign of insecurity. Most people who exhibit egomaniacal behavior, it's always about me, 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 and overdo it, as we see Gabriel overdoing it. It's usually to mask or hide from a certain insecurity, right? So they overdo it and become so self-centered because, in fact, they're not confident or comfortable with who they are. Anyone who's overly defensive about who they are and what their status is. We saw that again in how he was responding to Miss Ivers when she was challenging him on things. And he got all so defensive, he has to scream out, "I don't like Ireland. What do you buy?" Again, it's an indication of a character, I guess a character flaw, insofar as it's a sign of insecurity that's being masked. Rather than when you're insecure, if you're puzzled about the way you look, well, why don't you question that? And say, well, what's puzzling me? What is it I don't know about myself? That's one way to approach it. The other way is to ignore it and put up all these false airs, false appearances, think you're better than everyone else, and do not pursue or care about what other people are thinking because you're all about yourself. Okay, I know it's a bit of psychology there, but it's certainly a part of human behavior, a fairly obvious one. And certainly obvious in the context of the story. So, yeah, what about the song? What is it that makes you cry? And this is where now she reveals the story of her past love. I was thinking about a person long ago who used to sing that song. Okay? That's, again, the connection between the past love and the song that she heard on the stairs. Now, of course, we can pretty much anticipate how Gabriel's going to react to this. You were thinking about a person long ago, and who was the person long ago? Asked Gabriel, smiling. What kind of smile, I wonder that is? It was a person I used to know in Galway when I was living with my grandmother. And here we're going to see now. He's, the smile, he's still holding on to the smile because it still hasn't sunk in yet what's about to happen. The smile passed away from Gabriel's face. A dull anger began to gather again. Okay? Someone you were in love with, he said ironically. And now she tells him, right? And now it speaks as well to her not picking up on his anger, or if she does, just taking this moment for herself. Because now it's about her. And this is a problem for Gabriel. This isn't about him. This isn't something he can share with Button. This is something that happened before he even knew her. There was a young boy I used to know named Michael Furry. Right? He used to sing that song. Okay? Again, what we're looking at in this final scene is the transformation of Gabriel. All right? So be attentive to that and watch the moment when things start to change. He was silent. He did not want to think of her, to think that he was interested, he didn't want her to think that he was interested in a delicate boy. Now she's reminiscing. This has obviously had a huge impact on her. He's just angry. Oh, then you were in love with him? I used to go out walking with him, she said, when I was in Galway. I thought perhaps that was why you wanted to go to Galway with the Ivers girl. Look again, he can't think about her. Now he's reflecting on remember I showed you that previous moment when she says, oh, let's go to Galway. And he's making this connection. Oh, so you wanted to go to Galway because you were thinking about the boy, which is utterly untrue, because she doesn't start thinking about the boy, Michael, until she hears the song on the staircase, which happens afterwards. And she's like, what are you talking about? She asked in surprise, what for? What does that have to do with anything? His inability here to even begin to comprehend what she's experiencing and why it's important to her. Her eyes made Gabriel feel awkward. Note his reason here, right? Because, of course, at this point, he doesn't know much, right? She goes, what for? Why would I want to go to Galway? Well, he goes, how do I know? To see him, perhaps. He's jealous. Okay? But of course, this is where she tells him he is dead. He died when he was only 17. And note, it's quite a testament to her character that she's not getting angry with Gabriel for his selfish behavior here. She's still thinking about it. Isn't it a terrible thing to die so young as that? Gabriel's still angry, even though he knows that Michael is dead. What was he? And she says he was in the gasworks. Right? That's what he did. But again, what was he? What seemingly, because he's saying it ironically, what was he to you? Gabriel felt humiliated by the failure of his irony and the evocation of this figure from the dead, a boy in the gasworks. While he had been full of memories of their secret life together, full of tenderness and joy and desire, while he was thinking, remember, because when they were walking back, when he was all in his state of ecstasy and excitement and all this, he was thinking about their marriage day and their honeymoon and all this. And what he's saying here is while he was thinking about those days, okay, memories, the past, she had been comparing him in her mind to another. That's how he sees it. A shameful consciousness of his own person assailed him. He saw himself as a ludicrous figure, acting as a penny boy for his aunts, a nervous, well-meaning sentimentalist, orating to vulgarians. Orating, talking to, giving his speech is what it's referring to at the dinner party, to vulgarians, people who are vulgar. Okay? And idealizing his own clownish lusts. Right? This is the beginning of his awakening. The beginning of it. The pitiable, fatuous fellow he had caught a glimpse of in the mirror, right? Which we just saw over here. That puzzled look when he passes a mirror. Instinctively, he turned his back more to the light lest she might see the shame that burned on his forehead. He tried to keep up his tone of cold interrogation. He's trying to still play the only role that he really knows. But his voice, when he spoke, was humble and indifferent. Humble, yes. Indifferent? I suppose you were in love with this Michael Furry, Greta, he said. I was great with him at the time, she said. Her voice was veiled and sad. Veiled? He can't really read the voice. Gabriel, feeling now how vain it would be to try to lead her with her, okay, knowing now that what his plans were for the evening are over with, caressed one of her hands and said, also sadly, and what did he die of so young, Greta? Consumption, was it? Okay. And her answer, I think he died for me. Now, what's important here, right? I'm emphasizing this. This is where we're seeing Gabriel change. He saw himself as a ludicrous figure. He's starting to see who he really is. He's starting to recognize his selfishness. He's starting to recognize his limitations. He's starting to recognize that his wife, who he's been with for a long time, actually has a life of her own. A life that is very impacted by a past event that he cannot be part of. How the past infuses the present. And how what is dead in the past, both literally and figuratively, is with us in the present. This Michael Furry, who died many years ago, is still part of who Greta is. And Gabriel cannot share that. She says, I think he died for me. A vague terror seized Gabriel at this answer, as if he at that hour, when he had hoped to triumph, some impalpable and vindictive being was coming against him, gathering forces against him in a vague world. Note the word, terror. It's not anger. He's terrorized. As if some vindictive being was coming against him, gathering forces against him in a vague world. Of course, it's not a vindictive being. He's in terror because he realizes that he is not in control. He is not who he thinks he is or who he's tried to be to a large extent. But he shook himself free of it with an effort of reason. Okay? He gets hit with the terror. The terror is an important one. The terror is what can reveal things. It's not anger. It's terror of something that he doesn't fully understand. But he continues with reason. And he does continue to caress her hand. He did not question her again, for he felt that she would tell him of herself. he did not question her again, for he felt that she would tell him of herself, which is, of course, what she was doing. Her hand was warm and moist, did not respond to the touch, but he continued to caress it just as he had caressed her first letter to him that spring morning. That was what he was talking about earlier, when he was in his much better mood. Now she relates the story of what happened. Because, of course, when she says he died, for the exact word, he died for me. Now she explains the circumstances by which he died. And if you recall, I won't go into in detail, she was going to leave. She was going back to Dublin to go into a convent. He was sickly. He had tuberculosis. He came out to see her in the garden in the cold weather. He says he's a remember she referred to him as delicate. And he said he did not want to live. I implored him to go home at once and told him he would get his death in the rain, because he's standing out in the rain trying to see her before she leaves to go back to Dublin, but he did not want to live. He said he did go home, and I was only a week at the convent. He died, and he was buried. On that day, I heard that he was dead. Okay. So now she is opening up and revealing something not just intimate in her life, but something that Gabriel cannot fully share in. Not in the way that he understands sharing, because for him, there is no sharing. It's all about him. And he's recognizing something else here. He's recognizing that the kind of love that this Michael had, where he would go out into this rain, this kind of passion, he doesn't have. Okay. This now brings his epiphany to a full manifestation. She stopped, choking with sobs and overcome by emotion, flung herself face downward on the bed, sobbing in the quilt. Gabriel held her hand for a moment longer, irresolutely, and then, shy of intruding on her grief, let it fall gently and walked quietly to the window. Note, I don't know if it's in our edition, but this is a pivotal moment. She's told her story. She's overcome with emotion. He holds her hand for a moment longer, lets it fall gently, and he walks to the window to reflect. Gabriel, leaning on his elbow, looked for a few moments unresentfully. He's no longer resentful. He's not angry. So she had had that romance in her life. A man had died for her sake. Now he's reflecting, right? He's trying to now put this together. He's had some kind of change. He feels a certain change regarding himself now. It's still somewhat selfish, but it's a type of selfishness now in self-reflection that can allow him to have a better understanding of the self. A man had died for her sake. It hardly pained him now to think how poor a part he, her husband, had played in her life. How poor a part. He hasn't died for her sake. Someone else did. He watched her while she slept, as though he and she had never lived together as man and wife. Catch this. As though he and she had never lived together as man and wife. He sees everything differently here. His curious eyes rested long upon her face and on her hair, and as he thought what she must have been then, in that time of her first girlish beauty. His curious eyes rested long upon her face and on her hair, and as he thought of what she must have been then, he's now thinking of her, what she would have been like then. He's not just thinking about himself. All he seemed before to care about when he thought about his wife is what she was like when they were together. He's now expressing and entering into a kind of empathy. A strange, friendly pity for her entered his soul. Friendly pity for her entered his soul. This is new. He did not like to say even to himself that her face was no longer beautiful, but he knew that it was no longer the face for which Michael Fury had braved death. Okay, he's acknowledging things are different now. Time has passed. This event happened in the past. She's not the same, she doesn't look the same. But whatever happened then has moved along with her and is very much a part of who she is today. He wondered at his riot of emotions an hour ago. From what had it proceeded? Okay, so again, note this is all his thinking. Perhaps she had not told him all the story. His eyes moved over to the chair. He wondered at his riot of emotions. Why was I feeling that way? From his aunt's supper, from his own foolish speech. He's now thinking of his speech as foolish. He didn't think it was foolish back then when he gave it. The pleasure of the walk, he's reflecting now on everything that's transpired here. And then his thinking goes to his Aunt Julia. Remember, his wife is sleeping or sobbing on the bed now. This is all him reflecting about himself, his thoughts. He's trying to comprehend. He's recognizing a change within himself, within his very soul. And he thinks about his poor Aunt Julia. She too would soon be a shade, with the shade of Patrick Morgan and the horse. Remember, that was the story, who's now dead. The shade being someone who's dead, right? Remember the title. He had caught that haggard look upon her face for a moment when she was singing Arrayed for the Bridal. Remember, she was singing right before they ate. Soon, perhaps, he would be sitting in that same drawing room, dressed in black, his silk hat on his knees. The blinds would be drawn down, and Aunt Kate would be sitting beside him, crying and blowing her nose and telling him how Julia had died. He's reflecting now on his aunt, who's older. And he's saying, she's going to die soon. This is Patrick Morgan died, the same way that Michael had died. Now death is starting to enter into his thinking, his reflections. Right? Something's up. And now this is where the concept and the idea and the theme of death becomes so evident, that death is the neutralizer of all. He's recognizing his own Aunt Julia is going to die. He would cast his mind for some words that might console her and would find only lame and useless ones to console the sister. Yes, that would happen very soon. The air of the room chilled his shoulders. He stretched himself cautiously along under the sheets and lay down beside his wife. Now he gets into bed with his wife. Again, note what he's thinking to himself. One by one, they were all becoming shades. One by one, everyone is getting closer to death. Better pass boldly into that other world in the full glory of some passion, like Michael did. Michael Furry died for Greta in his passion. Whether that's actually how it happened, died of a disease. Did he actually die for her? That's the memory thing, how it's interpreted over time. But certainly the thinking of it is what is impacting Gabriel here. Better to pass boldly into that other world in the full glory of some passion than fade and wither dismally with age. He thought of how she who lay beside him had locked in her heart for so many years that image of her lover's eyes when he had told her that he did not wish to live. He's thinking of now about his wife. He's thinking about how she had that as part of her life, that image of her lover's eyes when he told her that he did not wish to live. He told her he did not wish to live without her. I can't live without you. That's how intense the 17-year-old Michael Fury's passion was for Greta, presumably 17 as well. Generous tears filled Gabriel's eyes. Remember, she referred to him as generous earlier, remember? After she kissed him. Generous now is being, now we're understanding. Generous in what way? He certainly didn't have that kind of generosity to be able to care for others. And now it's starting. He had never felt like that himself towards any woman. But he knew that such a feeling must be love. He's recognizing through his tears that he has never felt like that the way Michael Fury felt for anyone. And I recognizing that that feeling must be love, what he's acknowledging here is he's never been in love. And as a result, the tears gathered more thickly in his eyes. And in the partial darkness, he imagined he saw the form of a young man standing under a dripping tree. Other forms were near. Now, this gathering, if you will, of the dead. His soul had approached that region where dwell the vast hosts of the dead. He was conscious of, but could not apprehend their wayward and flickering existence. His own identity was fading out into a gray, note the color, impalpable world. The solid world itself, which these dead had one time reared and lived in, was dissolving and dwindling. As if there are two worlds here, the world of the living and the world of the dead. And now they're not being separated, they're dissolving into each other. Life and death and death and life, they cannot be separated. A little clear. A few light taps upon the pane made him turn to the window. It had begun to snow again. He watched sleepily the flakes, silver and dark, falling obliquely against the lamplight. The time had come for him to set out on his journey westward. Yes, the newspapers were right. Snow was general all over Ireland. It was falling on every part of the dark central plain, on the treeless hills, falling softly upon the bog of Allen, and farther westward, softly falling into the dark, mutinous Shannon waves. It was falling too upon every part of the lonely churchyard on the hill where Michael Fury lay buried. It lay thickly drifted on the crooked crosses and headstones, on the spears of the little gate, on the barren thorns. His soul swooned slowly as he heard the snow falling faintly through the universe and faintly falling like the descent of their last end upon all the living and the dead. The snow covers everything. The symbolism of the snow is what unites. It's a symbol of the universal and enmeshed, or the combining of both the living and the dead into a oneness. There is no separation. His recognition, his revelation, his epiphany of his own selfishness, recognition of it, that he's never really loved his wife. He never loved her because he's recognizing he never cared. He never asked her. He never inquired. His recognition of his own selfishness branches from that individuality of it and bursts open into a universal recognition of the universal reality of life and death being one and the same, as represented by how the snow covers it all. Questions?
So that is when Gabriel, like, figurative, he dies. I mean, because
At the end, what you're asking, what happens to Gabriel at the end? We don't know for sure. What we know, it's a great question. I love that question. What we know is he has an awakening, right? Remember, we talked about the epiphany, and that this epiphany is not just, it goes from just as a recognition within himself, but then a philosophical understanding much greater that covers the whole world. And now he says, right, very importantly, come to set out on his journey westward. What does that mean? We don't know. We certainly, there's no indication that he actually dies here. It's very ambiguous. What we know is he has greater awareness, that he's a changed person.
Yeah, maybe this is like the death of the old Gabriel and the beginning of a new Gabriel.
Exactly. But what is that new Gabriel going to do?
Oh, so we don't know.
We don't know.
Yeah.
Is he going to now be a changed man and have a much happier marriage with Greta? Because remember, he acknowledges that he doesn't love Greta.
Yes.
So is he going to leave Greta and then travel west? West representing Ireland, and now no longer go to the continent, to France and Germany, and go and follow the path that Molly Ivors suggested to him?
Yeah, we don't know that.
But that's, of course, that's one of the great qualities of a story like this. And this is very typical of shorter stories, is they leave a lot of ambiguity, where we as readers, as an audience, have to try and speculate. I mean, this is what we take after we finish reading the story, after perhaps we're done analyzing it, is we take this story with us, and it allows us to reflect on the questions that he's asking and recognize that we have the same types of questions. I mean, there's so much. Here's a relatively short story. It's pretty long for a short story, and there's much more we could do with this story. We touched on a lot of themes. I mean, just as a reminder, I know we're about to wrap up, but just to remind you, to go back to these PowerPoints, right? Because again, you see how many different themes, the nostalgia we talked about, right? Women, death, of course, death is which we went into mainly today, but all these things interact. And
yes,
they interact in the context of fiction, of literature, of art. It's not a medical journal here we're reading that's going to explain these things to us. He's looking at all these things from a perspective where there are no absolute answers. Frustrating as that may sound, That's what art and literature is about. We saw this in the previous texts that we studied. So a lot to think about there. Okay.
Yes.
I'll remind you, I mentioned this at the beginning, but I don't know if everyone was here. I will be posting your final exam question.
This week.
Yeah, at the latest, it'll be next Monday. I'm looking for, you'll have 2 weeks no matter what. Okay?
Yeah, you said that. Uh-huh.
So
So when it's gonna be due? I think it's gonna be
it'll be due 2 weeks from the day I post it.
So the presentation is gonna be on
Our
June
la-
3rd, right? June 3rd.
we don't have class on June 3rd.
Okay, so
Our last class is next week.
yeah. Okay.
Okay, so but I'm going to give you the exam before that class because I it's too tight for me to mark it and get the grades submitted. So you should expect the exam question at the latest next Monday, in which case it'll be due on the 8th. But
Okay.
it'll be clear. When I post it, the due date will be clear. The due date, I'll remind you, is firm.
Yeah, Derek, but today is the 20, and
Yeah.
the next one it's gonna be the last one, right? I mean, May the 27th.
Yeah.
So the essay is gonna be due that day?
No. The essay will be due 2 weeks from the day that I give it to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if we don't have classes.
No. I have time afterwards. There's the exam period and so on.
Okay,
So,
but that day is gonna be our last class with
yes,
you, right?
so
Okay, I understand. Okay, I understand. I got it.
So the 27th is going to be our last class, and it will. We're going to be talking about Arabic. So
Yes.
don't forget to read it. Very short.
Yeah, I read it.
I'm going to, and I'm going to show it to you now in a minute. I just want to answer this question. Can I post this video? I desperately hope to post this video. I won't know because, again, technical problems. If it records, it's posted. If it doesn't convert, I can't post it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't convert, I will do another pre-recorded video dealing with the ending that we just went over. Okay? So you'll get that one way or the other. And now remember we have those 2 more in-class assignments I'm going to show you right now, which I'm going to post right after this class. If I can find it. Just too many things. There we are. This is going to be your assignment. I'm going to be posting it today. It's due in 2 days, 48 hours. Okay, it's going to be posted right after this class.
Okay, so you're gonna give us the questions for our assignment today, you said, right?
Yeah, that's right, because remember we have 2 more of these, each worth 10%. This will be the first one. I'll be posting the second one in the next few days. I want to be able to give you 48 hours to write them. They're short, 150 to 200 words.
Okay.
It's just a paragraph.
Okay.
Okay, this isn't your final exam. Your final exam is a full essay. Okay.
Okay. This is an assignment. Okay.
This is an assignment, and the purpose is worth 10%, and it's going to be dealing with things that will help prepare you to write your final essay, I would argue. So what happens when Gabriel encounters Lily at the beginning of the day? That's it. You respond to that any way you want. What I do emphasize, though, please be attentive to your grammar and phrasing. It's as much a writing exercise as it is an analysis exercise. Okay. Short. Okay. You can write more if you want. You know me. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I just don't want you guys to be overwhelmed with the amount of work. This is, again, what you're gonna be doing when you do this assignment. Much of what some of that can probably easily be put into your final essay. Okay. So they work hand in hand. Okay, this will be posted. It's due on the 22nd. Today's the 20th. It's due on the 22nd, which is Friday. You have till midnight.
Okay.
Okay.
Until midnight.
Until
You said.
midnight.
Okay.
Again, I'm not. I'm pretty easy with this stuff. Okay. So again, if this doesn't convert, I will post in the next day or two a relative. Try to keep it as short as I can on that ending of the dead. Read Arabic for next week. You should anticipate, okay, that in your final exam, I'm not saying this is the way it's going to be, but you should anticipate that the final exam question is probably going to involve both the dead and Arabic.
Okay.
All right. I will tell you this much. You need to know both, and you certainly need to be familiar with the dead. Obviously, because it's the longer story. But I think Arabic, you'll find, and when you're reading Arabic, if you've read it, hopefully you can read it again. If you haven't read it, when you're reading Arabic, look to see if any of the same types of themes are in Arabic that we saw in the dead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Nope, it's clear.
We're good?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're good.
All right, everybody. As
All right.
always, be safe.
I have a question.
Um,
Wait, before we end, we're gonna start at 10 next class.
Yes, always at 10 because it's
Okay.
too many of us can't get here before 10.
Okay.
We can go longer if need be, but plan on 10. And of course, if any of you have any specific concerns or questions, you can contact me and I will do a one-on-one Zoom meeting with you. Okay?
Okay.
Oh, that option is always available to you. We just have to coordinate.
Sorry, another question. I'm gonna have English next semester on Monday. Are you gonna teach us also?
I think I'm teaching, I think 3 English courses. You would be taking, the TVE one. It would be
Yeah.
English 4. I'd have to double check my schedule, but yeah, I'm pretty sure I am teaching it next semester.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah, I'm happy.
Okay. Double check with when you're registering though, but I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
All right,
you.
everyone. We'll see you next week, and
Bye.
keep your eye open for the assignment, and we'll take it from there.
Okay,
Okay,
bye.
thank
Bye,
you,
sir.
Derek.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Bye.
Bye.